Good morning and welcome to Roland Academy webinar series. My name is Julie Gutierrez. I'm a product manager here at Roland DGA, and today's webinar is Stop Guessing, Start Knowing. So we have a guest speaker, Bruce Wright from X-rite. So just some housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them in the left side of your screen in the questions section. So we'll try to answer some questions throughout the webinar, and also we'll have a Q&A section set aside at the end of the webinar. So just as a reminder, we do have support videos and documents available on our support site at rolanddga.com, as well as additional support videos on our YouTube channel, and that's youtube.com/Roland DGA support. So Bruce, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Are you able to see my screen? Let me show my screen. And
looks great, Bruce.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Julie, and good morning, everyone in Roland Academy land. Wanted to take some time from your busy schedule today and talk a bit about color management and the X-rite suite of products that we have for getting accurate, correct color in your workflows. Now, for an awful lot of people, color management is right up there with root canal in terms of how pleasurable it can be. What we're going to try to do in the session today is show you that it doesn't have to be scary, doesn't have to be difficult, does not have to be expensive, and the benefits are multiple. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up on what we're going to be talking about today, I'll take you briefly through the product line that we have and explain the products that we do have that are relevant for color management. And then we'll take a quick look at some of the programs that will be used along with our color measurement and color management devices for making sure that you get correct color. Some of the things that we'll be covering today is we'll talk about spectrophotometers and colorimeters and what they do and how they do it. We'll talk about the differences between the i1 Pro that you may or may not already be familiar with and our new i1 Pro 2 series. We'll talk about the importance of monitor calibration as an essential first step. And we'll talk about the benefits of doing media profiles, building ICC profiles for a particular printer, particular paper at a particular resolution. So that's just sort of the highlights of what we're going to try to cover. I'll do my best to be brief on some of the things that I think we can skip over, and I'll try to give you the technical depth that I think is important where it's relevant. But that's always a bit of a balancing act. I'm sure some of you out there have been building profiles for a number of years, whereas others, this may be your first exposure to it. I'll try to cover something so it keeps everybody interested throughout the session. So to begin with, we're going to talk about the next generation of i1 professional color management solutions.
And Bruce, can you just move your mouse over to the right, please?
I have it as far over right as I can go right now.
Oh.
Are you seeing it in the middle of the screen, Julie?
Yes, it is, but that's all right if you can't do anything about it.
Wow. I have it on the far right-hand corner. Whoa. Okay. Let's try this. Better or worse?
No change, but that's okay. We can just continue on.
I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what's causing that. So just to recap, the i1 Pro spectrophotometer from X-rite or from Graytag Macbeth prior to the merger with X-rite, it's been the industry standard since 2001. And for people who do this professionally, it's been a tool of choice and an essential tool in their toolkit. Back in 2011, X-rite introduced i1 Profiler software, which was designed to be the next generation of profiling software for people who were using Graytag Macbeth's i1 Match, Profile Maker 5, or X-rite's Monocle Profiler software.
And Bruce, just sorry to interrupt. We are just seeing the title screen. Did you happen to click to a different slide, or I'm just wondering if it's frozen?
No, I did click to a different slide. You're not seeing that?
No, I'm actually seeing a title slide. Let me pull some. Oh, there we go. Now I can see it.
There we go. Ah,
thank you.
My fault. My fault. So let me just go back here. Okay, so that's the slide that you were seeing before, or you started out with the title slide, this one?
Correct. There's the title slide, and
great. I think I've got it under control now. My apologies.
Thank you.
Okay, so now in June of 2011, we introduced the i1 Display Pro, which was our next generation colorimeter. And a colorimeter is a device that's used for measuring emissive light, which is to say that you can profile a monitor and a projector with a colorimeter. If you want to do reflective work, meaning measuring colors off paper, then you need a spectrophotometer. And that's what the i1 Pro and now the i1 Pro 2, they're in that category. And in April 2012, we released the i1 Pro 2, which is the next generation of spectrophotometers. We've tried to make it familiar to the people who had an i1 Pro before, but we tried to improve where we could in terms of making the device simpler to use, more reliable in its measurements, easier to care for. So the i1 Pro 2 looks very similar to the i1 Pro that came before it. Some differences are this one has a completely different light structure inside the device, and it also has user control lights on the top to give an idea of whether you're going in the correct direction or whether you have a fault in your measurements. And then along with the i1 Pro 2, we've updated i1 Profiler software to the most current version of 1.3.2 for PC users, 1.3.1 for Mac users. It comes in two basic configurations for you to consider if you're dealing with Roland printers. There's the i1 Basic Pro 2, which allows you to do monitor profiling and projector profiling with the option of adding printer profiling at a later date, or the i1 Publish Pro 2, which gives you monitor profiling, projector profiling, and printer profiling for RGB printers, CMYK printers through a RIP, or even multicolor printers, meaning CMYK plus up to 4 other channels. We're very pleased with the Industrial Design Award that we picked up with the i1 Pro 2. It's designed to be something that fits in the hand very nicely and is easy and comfortable for someone to do their measurements with. Inside the i1 Pro 2, you're looking at the front end of it, on the left side. Those are the measurement optics. And then the spectral engine that's at the back is where the computations are done. The measurement information then gets interpreted and then fed back to our software. What we've done here is we've tried to make it a much more reliable, much more stable instrument in a variety of temperatures and humidity conditions. Particularly with the type of weather that we have right now, and for people who are in very humid climates, i1 Pros might have had a tendency to change their measurements during the day if they got too hot or too humid, whereas the i1 Pro 2 is much more resistant to temperature and humidity changes in an office during the day. What we've tried to do is we've tried to make this spectrophotometer as simple to use as we can, something that's compatible with all manner of software, both from X-rite and from third-party companies, and an investment that someone can continue to use for a long period of time. We have a lot of people out there who've been using their i1 Pros for close to a decade, and I have every expectation that people with the i1 Pro 2s will use them for a similarly long and productive life. Now, one thing that's very different between the i1 Pro and the i1 Pro 2 is that the i1 Pro 2 has 2 different light sources inside it. It has a tungsten lamp, which is the same light that was used inside the i1 Pro, and it also has an LED light, which is designed to show up the effects of optical brighteners. Now, when you're printing on vinyls and many of the current papers that are out there, to make these materials a bright, bright white, optical brighteners are put into the manufacture of those materials. The challenge is that the eye can see that as being a brighter white, but a spectrophotometer doesn't behave exactly the same way as an eye. So a spectrophotometer would see those optical brighteners as a blue tint, and to compensate for that, it would want to put yellow into the resulting profile for compensation. Well, we don't want all our profiles to have a yellow push to them, so having a device that's able to measure the amount of optical brighteners and then compensate for them in software is very, very important. And the 2 light sources that are inside the i1 Pro 2 can do that dynamically, meaning that they can sense the amount of optical brighteners that are in the material. If you were using the i1 Pro beforehand, you had to make a choice. You had to buy a device that would allow the effects of optical brighteners to be measured, or a UV cut device that would block them at source with a filter. Most RIPs would require a UV cut device. So for someone who had already acquired an i1 Pro, but not the UV cut model, that meant they had to buy a second spectrophotometer. So with the i1 Pro 2, by incorporating both of those measurement modes into the same instrument, we've made it much simpler for people. They don't have to make a choice, and there's no finding, I've got the wrong instrument. There's only one i1 Pro 2, and if you've got one of those, then your device can measure effectively and compensate for the effects of optical brighteners. And as you can see here, it just shows you the two lamps, the tungsten lamp, which gives the normal illumination, and then the UV LED, which will sense the amount of optical brighteners that are in the material. We won't go into the mathematics behind this. It's something that we'll just say that it works very, very well and does mathematical computations very quickly in software. So we've tried to make the device a very long-term investment for someone. Typically, you're going to invest in a color management system and use it for a long period of time. And we tried to make it something that doesn't involve a lot of question, am I buying the right device? If you've got an i1 Pro 2, you've got the correct spectrophotometer for almost every situation. One thing that is important is that the device has a new way to try to make sure that it's always measuring correctly, so it has some internal error checking, and it can stabilize itself. Again, an important issue if you're in an environment where the heat and humidity are changing during the day or overnight, having the device out in your office. The calibration technology that's built into the i1 Pro 2 allows the device to do a better job of keeping itself stable. One simple thing, but very, very important, is that we've made a removable glass over the optics so that you can clean that effectively. With the i1 Pro, that had an opening, and it required that someone would have to take compressed air and blow it out, and it wasn't all that necessarily easy to get all the dust and dirt out of that opening. With the i1 Pro 2, we've got that glass covering. It can slide out. You can clean it effectively with a cleaner such as Sparkle, and then make sure that you're never dealing with dust and dirt in your measurement. Also, the calibration tile, the plate that has the white calibration dot that the i1 Pro 2 uses, that's got a covered shield, so it's not going to get dirty while it's out in the office. That was something that if someone didn't have a calibration tile that was clean, they might fail calibration in our software or someone else's. So we've just tried to make this something that's more resilient to any sort of environmental issues, we might say. Now you'll see in the picture here, someone is doing a measurement of a target with the i1 Pro 2 on the metal ruler, the aluminum ruler that comes with it. One important benefit of the i1 Pro 2 and the aluminum ruler is that it's resistant to the effects of any solvent inks. The i1 Pros used a plastic ruler, and if you had a target that wasn't completely dry and it had solvent inks, those solvents could have an impact on the plastic that was used for the ruler. The i1 Pro 2 is resistant to that because it's aluminum. It also has a sensor underneath it, and you can't see easily in this picture, but there's a zebra stripe on the aluminum ruler, so the sensor that's on the underside of the i1 Pro 2 is reading that zebra stripe and making sure that it knows what speed you're reading at so that the measurements get done quickly and you don't have to go back and remeasure rows. Anyone who's ever tried doing some measurements with an i1 Pro, you know until you get the right rhythm behind the measurement of the rows, it can be a little bit challenging. The zebra stripe and the visual sensor on the underside of the i1 Pro 2 will eliminate a lot of that back and forth trial and error period. Now we talked earlier about monitor profiling, and I can't emphasize enough, if you do nothing else in color management, profiling your monitor is an essential first step. The i1 Pro 2 can profile your monitor. However, if you decided that you only needed to have a design station profile for the monitor, you can also do this with an i1 Display Pro, which is a colorimeter and a considerably less expensive device for monitor profiling. And the main reason why we do monitor profiling is you want to be able to see correctly the colors that are in the digital file, because until you know what's in the digital file, it's very, very difficult to know whether the printout is going to come out correctly. And that's, at the end of the day, what most people are concerned with. Is the print going to be what I'm expecting? Is it going to be what I want? Is it going to be what my client wants? So in terms of the usage that you can use the i1 Pro 2, it can measure those targets with the ruler. You can also measure ambient light conditions. If you're ever making prints that are going to be viewed in a gallery or some sort of museum, the lighting conditions in those galleries and museums are not normal daylight. The i1 Pro 2 has an ambient light head that you can put over top of the device, so you can measure what the color temperature of the light is, as well as the amount of light that's in a particular area, so that you can build that into your printer profile so that images will appear color neutral under that specific lighting condition. You'll also notice in the lower, excuse me, the lower left-hand corner, there's the i1 Pro 2 up on a stand. That's the stand that you would use for doing projector profiling. And in the lower right-hand corner shows you a spot measurement tool. So if you have a particular sample that someone brings in that you want to know what the color values are, you can measure it with the i1 Pro in a spot mode. We think that we've tried to take all the good things about the i1 Pro that we had and added to them with the i1 Pro 2. So from an operator skill standpoint and training time, anyone who's used an i1 Pro can immediately move over to an i1 Pro 2 with no retraining time necessary. And someone who's just picking up an i1 Pro 2 for the first time should be able to master it more quickly than someone who had an i1 Pro prior to that. i1 Profiler software is the X-rite color management and color profiling software that comes along with the i1 Pro. And you'll obviously use it for profiling monitors, and then depending upon which version of the i1 Pro 2 you have, you could use it for profiling printers as well. And the feature set inside i1 Profiler, it's got automatic compensation for optical brighteners in papers. You can optimize your profiles for a particular light condition or optimize for certain spot colors that are important to you or to a client. And it has a number of tools inside. I'll give you a quick look inside the user interface of i1 Profiler in a few minutes. The things that we've updated in the newest version is we've added support for the i1 Pro 2 spectrophotometer. We've added the ability to edit the white point of a profile. For people who are doing measurements in other software such as Profile Maker or ColorPort, we've added the ability to improve the flavors of CGATS readings that we can interpret correctly. And we've reduced the patch size down to 7 millimeters, which means that you can print more colors on a certain size of paper and get a more nuanced, better profile resulting from it. And for people who are doing multicolor profiling, the 1.3 version and higher has some improvements in the color math that was used to generate those multicolor profiles. In terms of the basic pricing for these products, the manufacturer's suggested retail price for the i1 Basic Pro 2 is $1,199. That includes the spectrophotometer as well as all the accessories that come with it and software for doing monitor profiling and projector profiling. The i1 Publish Pro 2 has the same physical hardware but adds the licenses for doing all the printer profiling that we can do with i1 Profiler. Just a bit of a recap on what we talked about there. We think that it's a very versatile tool. We know that it's a very accurate tool based on history and also the improvements that we've made to it. And we think that by having the lights on the top of the i1 Pro 2 as well as the sensor underneath, it's a much easier tool to use than the one that came before it. And reliability with its own self-checking mechanism that's inside, it'll be even more reliable than the i1 Pro was. Now, along with i1 Profiler software, we also include Pantone Color Manager software, and I'll show you that. But it's designed to help people understand what's going to happen to a particular Pantone color when I apply a particular profile that I built for my printer and my paper. Because a lot of people will come in armed with a Pantone number and just magically expect that that color is going to be exactly what they get in all cases. Pantone Color Manager helps to bridge the gap between what you want to get and what actually will come out of your printer so that you can have correct expectations on what's going to result. i1 Publish Pro, in addition to Pantone Color Manager, adds in Color Checker camera software, and this would be for people who are shooting raw in Lightroom or Photoshop. It creates a DNG profile so that you can correctly compensate for any sort of lighting characteristics in the sessions of shootings that you're doing. So hardware between those two configurations is the same. The software bundle gets expanded with the i1 Publish Pro 2. And just to give you an idea in terms of the features, again, just to recap, the i1 Display Pro monitor and projector profiling also includes a license for Pantone Color Manager. The i1 Basic Pro 2 gives you the spectrophotometer so you can measure reflective surfaces. In this case, the licenses for printer profiling aren't in the Basic Pro, but they do get added into either the Photo Pro or the Publish Pro. Now, we didn't talk about the i1 Photo Pro 2 because it's really not aimed at people who use RIPs. If you're going to use a RIP to print your files, then you're going to use the i1 Publish Pro, because that has the abilities to do CMYK or CMYK plus up to 4 other channels. And just to give you an overview of the X-rite portfolio of products, we have products that are aimed at the prosumer or the hobbyist. That would be the Color Monkey family. And then the i1 family is really aimed at the professional graphics environment. You'll see the i1 Display Pro is the colorimeter, and that's the small device, the small square silver and black device. And then the various versions of i1 Publish software only for people who already have an i1 Pro, or the i1 Basic Pro 2 up through the Publish Pro 2. They can buy hardware and software together or just buy upgrades. And for the people who do an awful lot of profiling, we have 2 methods of automating the procedure. There's the I/O table, which takes the i1 Pro or i1 Pro 2 and puts it in an automated arm for allowing you to step away while it measures the thousands of patches. Or then there's the i1 ISIS, which is a sheet reading device. Probably not ideal for people who do a lot of large format work, because it's not going to handle some of the thicknesses that you might print on a wide format printer. But for people who are doing only paper profiling, the i1 ISIS would be our fastest, most automated way of building profiles and measuring things.
And Bruce, we do have a couple of questions here. So
sure.
One question is, how does the i1 Pro 2 compare to the X-rite DPT-41B?
Well, the DTP-41B is an excellent device. It's something that we no longer make anymore. It was a fine device in its day. It's much, much faster, almost an order of magnitude faster in doing its measurements. And it's not limited in terms of sheet size the way the 41 was. Nothing wrong with the DTP-41. It was state-of-the-art when we were producing it a number of years ago.
Okay, and do you have a source of or a recommendation of how people can upgrade from the i1, the first one to the second one to the Pro 2?
Well, you can purchase an i1 Pro 2. Obviously, then you'd end up with 2 spectrophotometers. What some people will do is, if they have more than one location, they might use the i1 Pro 2 in their busiest location, and the i1 Pro might be relegated to the less busy one. If someone has a number of licenses for software in their i1 Pro, our software, i1 Profiler, has the ability to move those licenses over to the i1 Pro 2. But at the end of the day, this is probably a question that would go to the person that they're buying the device from. I don't know whether dealers will have any sort of trade-in programs or not. I'm on the technical side, and I really can't tell you whether there's any sort of program like that in place.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint. No, not leave the webinar. Don't do that. I'm going to, yeah, let's not leave the webinar. Let's close my presentation, and let's go and open up i1 Profiler to show you that. And you're seeing my i1 Profiler screen, I hope?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Okay. Now, i1 Profiler has 2 flavors to it. It has the basic mode, which we're in right now, and this tries to simplify building profiles for someone who might not have done much profile building in the past. It also has an advanced mode, and the advanced mode gives you more control. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a better profile. It just means you might have more control over the conditions. For display profiling, you click on display profiling. It identifies all the various monitors you have connected to your computer. If you have 2 monitors, then you would see monitors 1 and 2 up in the top, and you would click on whichever one you want to profile. Then you can tell it the color temperature. In this case, D65 is our recommended color temperature, as well as the luminance target you want to aim for. After you've done that, click on measurement. It will see the device. In this case, I've got an i1 Display Pro connected, and then I can ask it to go through and do the measurements. I'm not going to dazzle and or bore you by letting you watch five minutes of color patches go past. Take my word for it. It would build a monitor profile and then show you the result. We'll go back to the home screen. One of the things that we've tried to do is we've tried to make this a very friendly program for people. So over on the left-hand side is where you choose what you want to do. Over on the right-hand side is where you tell it is it basic or advanced mode. It shows you the licenses that are stored inside your i1 Pro or your dongle. It allows you to transfer licenses between an old i1 Pro and a new i1 Pro 2. I'm currently using the i1 Display for i1 Display Pro for my monitor profiling, but I could choose to use the i1 Pro or i1 Pro 2 spectrophotometers just as easily. One thing that we don't make enough emphasis on, and I really do want to point out, is that we have a number of training videos stored within the program, and that when someone decides that they want to learn how to use the software, they don't have to suffer in silence or read through a long book. They can come here to the play video, and there's a number of I1 Profiler workflows that they can watch a video on first. After you've seen it done, then it becomes fairly simple to go through and try to replicate that yourself. In addition to having those videos, and let's just cancel out of that, we also have the I1 Profiler online, and by clicking this icon, if you're connected to the internet, it'll take you automatically to our support site with all our technical information on I1 Profiler. So you're never suffering alone in terms of you're trying to figure out something. You can go down and click on the online button, and it will bring you to our website. Just show you quickly the advanced mode. The advanced mode, again, has our display profiling. It allows you to profile. It also allows you to find out the quality of your monitor and how uniform your monitor is across the various quadrants of it. Projector profiling, again, you can do a profile and you can evaluate the quality of that profile in terms of how accurate it is versus what it should be. And for printer profiling, you can do RGB printers, CMYK printers, or CMYK up to 4 other channels. And then once you've selected a printer, we have a number of features there. There's linearization for RIPs that don't have that feature. There's printer profiling, which is the most commonly used portion of I1 Profiler. There's optical brightener profiling, or OBC profiling. And then we have something called optimization. And optimization is when you take a profile and then you rebuild it a second time by adding in a special range of colors, either sampled from a representative image or from a number of color values that you bring in from Pantone Color Manager. We also have the ability to analyze data sets. So if you did 2 measurements of charts, you could compare the difference between them and see if you have something that, if the measurements should be trusted, or if there perhaps is something in the first set of measurements that should be revisited. And we also have measurement of reference charts for people who are trying to use the I1 Pro device not only for profiling, but in process control. You might hear the words G7 or P2P targets. That would be where the measure reference chart feature would kick in. And again, the basic mode or the advanced mode all offer the same display, projector, printer profiling. Just the degree of being able to delve down into it will change between the 2 modes. Close that one for a second and close this.
And Bruce, we do have a question regarding how, for example, I1 Profiler, does that work in conjunction with other RIP profilers such as FlexiSign Pro?
Yes, it does. And what you find is that many RIPs that are out there, obviously they're designed to send files through to your printer. Some RIPs have the facility for building color profiles in them. Other RIPs don't have that facility at all. So depending upon the RIP that you have and the license that you have, you may already have the ability to build profiles within the RIP software, and then you would have a choice. You could build profiles with the RIP software if they have that ability, or you could build profiles with I1 Profiler. For the people who have a RIP and have the ability to profile already, then they might already own an I1 Pro or an I1 Pro 2. But we think that our I1 Profiler software is particularly good at crafting profiles, so a lot of people will be justifiably curious to see what sort of results they could get profiling with I1 Profiler. But our role here is to play nice with whatever you have. If you're using a RIP that allows you to build profiles, then you just need to have a measurement device, and we'd be very happy if you chose the I1 Pro or the I1 Pro 2 as your measurement device.
And for example, we've got a question from Brett regarding the RIP poster print. Are you familiar with that RIP, and does that work through iPublisher?
Well, you can build profiles in I1 Profiler, and then you can bring those into poster print.
Okay, thank you.
Almost every RIP will have the ability to accept a profile from an external source. It would be a very unusual RIP that wasn't expecting or at least allowing that to happen. What I have up on the screen here is Pantone Color Manager software. And Pantone Color Manager software, you'll notice at the top we have the alert saying that my current display profile is older than it should be. Normally we would recommend that at least every 30 days you build a monitor profile. And the reason for building a monitor profile is you want to see what's in the digital file. Because until you know what's in the digital file, it's very difficult to know whether it's being displayed correctly and whether you're actually editing something in the way that you should be editing it. Now, after you've profiled your monitor, then that alert would go away. But currently I've got one of the Pantone guides up here, the Pantone Color Bridge for coated paper. And there are a number of different fan decks that are loaded into Pantone Color Manager. There's the formula guide for people who are used to using mixing of inks for spot colors. We have both of those in coated and uncoated. If you're dealing with someone who has gotten a Pantone fan deck from a printer or from an ink company, they're going to give you a Pantone formula guide specification. And those would indicate how you could create a color if you were mixing spot inks to have that happen. That's not the way that a wide format printer would work, and that's an unrealistic expectation. But we can show somebody, if they specify a color based on a solid color formula guide, we can show them, okay, based on that guide, the colors that have the exclamation mark and the yield sign over top of it, these are colors that are going to have a very difficult time to be correctly printed with the majority of printers that are out there. Now currently, what we're showing here is we're showing these are the colors that visually need to be, you need to understand that they don't display completely correctly because of the color is out of the gamut of many monitors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a printer profile to this, and then when I apply the printer profile, you'll notice that some of these patches differ considerably between what's on the left and what's on the right. The patch that's on the right, it shows you the effects of the particular printer profile that you're using. And this is a very important thing to be able to see. Some colors don't show much of a discrepancy at all. In the case of my Pantone 7626, on my screen I'm having almost an imperceptible difference between the left and the right-hand side. But when I look at 7625, there I can see a visual difference. And that's just alerting me to the fact that that particular color is going to be challenging if I'm using the printer profile that I've specified. Now, one way to improve the ability to represent a Pantone color would be to build a profile for a better type of material. So this is a very useful tool when someone's trying to decide upon what the right material to print their files would be. Well, let's see what happens to certain colors that are important to us when we apply the printer profile. So we can specify a number of printer profiles that we might have, and depending upon the profile, you can see that when we choose a different printer profile, the color values between left and right suddenly become a lot better. So when we move to a profile that's done for a better substrate, then we're going to get a more faithful reproduction of all the various Pantone colors. Now we can save those colors, and if we save those colors out, we can then import them into a particular program, such as Adobe Creative Suite. And what I've done here is I've bridged the Pantone colors along with a particular inkjet printer profile that I had. And then I can import those colors into a RIP, or I can find out the designation for those colors. So when I click on that particular color, I find that that Pantone 133C gives me what my profile applied was and what my recommended RGB values would be. If this was a profile done for a CMYK printer, then I'd see my recommended CMYK values as well. So you can create custom colors with the values that are accurate for that Pantone color when it's treated with a particular printer profile that you're using. So the thinking behind Pantone Color Manager is to give somebody a way to try to understand what's going to happen between my particular colors that I choose and a particular printer profile that we might want to employ. So it's a good check, even if you never print anything, it's a very good check to run to see what's going to happen to certain Pantone colors that are important to you or to a client. So Pantone Color Manager, that comes as part of the bundle with i1 Publish Suite. So i1 Profiler is the program where you spend most of your time. Pantone Color Manager would be used to try to build a palette of colors that could be imported into Adobe Creative Suite, or simply to see what's going to happen to my colors when I apply the particular profile that I built with i1 Profiler and see what's going to happen. So let's go back to i1 Profiler again. And just to take a quick look inside the advanced mode for printer profiling, here's the methodology behind it. When you go to printer profiling, you start by telling it how many patches you want to use. My recommendation is that less is more when it comes to the number of patches you use. So it starts out with a minimum number of 400 patches, and it goes up to a maximum of 6,000. realistically, anything above 2,000 for the majority of printers that we're going to be working with would be overkill. So choosing a small number of patches to begin with. If you want to scramble those patches so that the color values are placed randomly across the sheet, that's a pretty good idea. And then you can also choose to use a particular linearization file if your RIP has one. After you've created the number of patches, then you click on the test chart icon, and then you can configure that test chart for whatever measurement device you have. In this case, I could choose from an i1 Pro or an i1 Pro 2, or if I had the automated table, the i1IO table, I could automate for that. And as we go to the i1IO table, the patches can get smaller because that arm can be very precise in where it positions the i1. So we'll go back to setting this up for the i1 Pro 2, and then I can print that target either by clicking and choose print and send it through to my print queue, or choose save, and then I can save that file as a TIFF file and then drag that into my RIP and print it out in whatever fashion the RIP allows for non-color managed work. You don't want any sort of color management to be imparted to the target you're printing because you're going to build a profile based on this. After you've printed the target and let it dry for an appropriate period of time, and for most people, a target will give a dramatically different measurement result 10 minutes after being printed. And if you can let it dry for a longer period of time, you'll usually get a more reliable, more neutral gray as well. In the measurement, we connect our instrument. In this case, I don't have an i1 Pro 2 connected. Connect the measurement, and then go through and do your measurement either by hand or if you've got it in an I/O table. We talked about lighting, and you can choose a number of lighting conditions. D50 is daylight, but if you knew there was a different color temperature you're going to be viewing something under, like D65, you can choose that as a lighting condition and optimize your profile for that particular lighting condition. Alternately, you can connect up an i1, an i1 Pro or an i1 Pro 2, and you can measure the lighting in that area and get an exact light characteristic of the gallery or the studio where you're going to be displaying the work. After you've done the lighting, you're going to go to Profile Settings, and in Profile Settings, you'll tell it what sort of ink coverage you want to aim for. Do you want to do any sort of work in terms of your black start points, etc.? I'd recommend for most people you leave it in the default, build a few profiles and get a feel for it before going in and doing editing of these settings. The very good news about every step in the way is that if I've got a particular set of settings that I find work very well for me, I can click on Save, and it will save those settings in a file. Where this becomes very valuable is when we've got one person in an office or a shop that is the color guru. That person can go through and build profile settings that are most appropriate for the various substrates that they use. They can save those settings, and let's just call this default setting 01. We'll save this setting, and then the next time someone wants to use those settings, all I have to do is take them, drag them, drop them onto profile settings, and it will load the various settings that the person has chosen. I had a white point loaded from those settings. It wasn't valid, my mistake. But the good news is that you don't have to have everybody in the office be at the same level for skill. Someone who's most skilled in the office can go through and save those workflows, and then other people who want to build profiles can benefit from that knowledge by dragging and dropping the profiles and then building a profile from that set of settings. All the person who would need to do is print out a new target, measure that target, and ask the software to build the profile.
Bruce, we've got a couple of questions here.
Yep.
The first question is regarding lighting conditions. So do you have a good recommendation for resources of learning about different light conditions, and also how can you measure the lighting conditions of where the graphics are going?
Well, the short answer is there's an awful lot you can read about lighting that will make your eyes roll into the back of your head. It can be a very technical topic. But the next time you're at a Lowe's or a Home Depot, walk over to the paint department. Invariably, every paint department that I've been in recently has a light indicator that shows you daylight, fluorescent light, and incandescent light. So you can see the effects of those lighting conditions on colors. Incandescent light, or light off a normal light bulb, is very warm by comparison to daylight, which would be known to be neutral or 5,000 degree Kelvin. And fluorescent lights are typically seen to be cool, meaning the color temperature is higher. So to visually see the difference between those three, that's probably the fastest and easiest way. In terms of measuring the light in a particular area, the i1 Pro 2 and the i1 Pro before it both came with ambient light heads that you would snap over. It's a plastic diffuser, and then that would let you measure the particular light characteristics of any place that you want to go. The only caveat is you'd have to have your computer connected so you can have i1 Profiler software loaded. So if you put it on a laptop, for example, you could walk out to a gallery, put your i1 Pro 2 up in front of the place where the picture is going to be displayed, and measure the exact lighting characteristics of that area.
Thank you. And this is a pretty specific question regarding, does the i1 Pro 2 work in transmissive mode for profiling backlit material?
And the short answer to that one is no, it is not. We do not have a device in our current portfolio that's designed for measuring transmissive materials. They're always going to be challenging. We did have, once upon a time, a couple of devices that were designed for transmissive materials. Unfortunately, we're not making any of those devices at the current time. What most people will do is they will try to find a material that is similar to the properties of the transmissive material for everything with the exception of the white point, and then they will make some white point edits in i1 Profiler. But I'll be honest with you and tell you that transmissive materials, because of the physical properties of some backlit films, they can be very challenging to profile. The i1 Profiler software does not have a specific setting for backlit materials. It's going to call for a little bit of experimentation.
Okay, and then in regards to the iProfiler profile settings, is there a recommended setting for each paper, or a default or starting points or best practices to know what your settings, where you should start at?
Well, the way that I'd approach that typically is I would try doing the smallest number of patches to begin with, 400 to, let's say, 800 patches to begin with, small number of patches. And in i1 Profiler, if you just use the default settings to begin with, you'll have a good reference or baseline to look at the profile. And then once you've built the profile, then you can evaluate that profile with the images that you see in the software. We have a variety of images that are built into the software, and you can go in and look at those particular images. And it's thinking. So you can either use one of the images that is in the test suite for the program, or you can go and load your own custom image. So if you had a particular shop image you wanted to use for evaluation, I would recommend that you start with one of these images to try to do some visual evaluations, and then you can also go in and look at it on a channel-by-channel basis. So if you want to see what your cyan, your magenta plate, your yellow, and finally your black plate look like, you can get an idea. So building a few profiles by taking your measurement information, doing a few changes to it, and then building a few profiles. Then before you ever print anything, you can come here and do some visual evaluations with these reference images to see whether you think the profile result you got is going to be suitable for your use. And then I take it into Adobe Creative Suite, likely Photoshop, and softproof with the profile on some real work. And ultimately, the short answer is that we won't put features in there that are specific to a certain substrate, but by and large what we're aiming for is we're aiming to try and get the best color with the least amount of ink. And that's the thinking behind i1 Profiler. It's trying to make sure that we're not adding too much ink in, because in getting vibrant color, adding more ink isn't always the recipe to get it.
Thank you.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I tried to give you a brief flavor and overview of what we've got both from a hardware side and the software side. The i1 published suite consists of the hardware, i1 Profiler software, Pantone Color Manager software, Color Checker camera software. And I think that's all I have for you folks today.
Okay, Bruce, looks like we've got another question. It's just regarding the different lights. So Shane had a question regarding choosing D65 versus D50 when profiling. Can you just elaborate? It regarding why you would choose one over the other again?
Sure. D50, or daylight, is the most common lighting characteristic of how printer profiles are to be built. So when people are evaluating work in a pre-press environment, they will put a printed result under a D50 or a 5000K light to evaluate it. When you're building a monitor profile, if you're trying to represent what a D50 result on print would look like, building your monitor profile to D65 would be the correct situation. Because reflected light and emitted light are a little bit different. D50 for your printed work would be our standard recommended color temperature. D65 would be our standard recommended color temperature for monitor profiling.
Excellent. Thank you. And then in regards to, it looks like there's an icon that says Save Workflow. Can you just briefly describe what that does?
Sure. Save Workflow allows you to do everything, for example, all these steps in the process: patch set, test chart, measurement, lighting, profile settings. If I wanted to, without building a profile, I could then save that workflow, and then those workflows get stored down here in the asset area. So it just means that you can get the benefit of all the settings that you've carefully determined in all these various steps just by saving that workflow and then dragging and dropping that workflow again.
Thank you.
And your workflow has measured information in it, so what you'll have to do is you will have to do a new set of measurements. So you've got all the settings correctly set in the workflow file. You just need to feed it a fresh set of measurements to build your profile.
All right. Well, that looks like it might be the end of our questions. So if anything comes up in the next couple of seconds, I will go ahead and let you know. But I will. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen and give people the opportunity to. Oh, we do have a question. So this looks like a pretty technical question, so we can try to answer it, or we can also email back. But it sounds like this person is printing the linearization sheets, and they get a lot of ink on the sheet, so it looks like marble. And I think that's probably because you might need to print that target without any color management controls. So Bruce, can you add anything to that?
Sure. Before you build a color profile with I1 Profiler, in your RIP software you would usually choose ink limits for a particular paper and then do linearization. You don't want to put down too little color. You don't want to put down too much so that the substrate can't properly handle it. So setting your ink limits and then doing your linearization would be important preliminary steps before you print your target. If you're getting some sort of texture to the image or the test target or the linearization chart, it sounds like it's exceeding the ink limits for what that substrate can handle.
Great.
There shouldn't be any modeling or any sort of obvious orange peeling to the patches.
Excellent. Thank you. And there was a comment, someone said that they had mentioned they thought that X-rite had a loyalty program, so if you had an older device, you might be able to upgrade at a discount. So if anyone has questions regarding upgrading from the i1 to the i1 Pro 2, I'd recommend going to the X-rite website, and you can even call either, I would imagine, customer support and or email them to get more information regarding that. So I don't have any further information to share regarding that. However, one of the attendees did comment that they think there is a program that exists like that. So thank you for adding that. All right, so Roland is now carrying these, some of the X-rite products. So you can actually go on our website. And so hopefully you can all see my screen now. So this is the Roland DGA Store. And on the store, we are currently highlighting the color management products, but you can actually go under inkjet accessories. So we're carrying the i1 Basic Pro 2 and the i1 Published Pro 2. And if you recall, the difference between the two is the second one, the iPublish Pro 2, includes the iProfiler, so you can actually profile media. Otherwise, the first package, you wouldn't actually be able to profile media. you'd still be able to calibrate your monitor, linearize your printer, but to create a custom profile, you would need to purchase the i1 Publish Pro 2. So if there's no further questions, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. This webinar will be posted on our archive at rolanddga.com/webinars. And next week, please join us for tips and tricks on color management properties in VersaWorks. So this kind of all ties together, and we also have other X-rite webinars that are recorded in our webinar archive that shows you how to calibrate your monitor, create a monitor profile, and also do linearization. So I encourage you to watch those videos also. So thank you again, Bruce. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for your time.